Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction.
See what the Empire has done to your lives? Your families and your freedom?
Good people will fight if we lead them.
The rebellion is spreading.
Now we take the war to them.
The Republic will be reorganized.
Systems either change or die.
Into the first.
You give way to an enemy this evil with this much power, and you condemn the galaxy to an eternity of submission.
And wake up. There is one way. They're fighting from the start.
Long live the Empire!
Fight the Empire!
Let's call it war.
Remember this. Try.
Hey, Sophie.
Hey, Eleanor.
I was gonna make a joke about Jedi here, but I don't want to force it.
Perish.
Hello and welcome to Daughters of Ferrix, a show about real-world politics and history in the fake world, Star Wars. First, I want to welcome to the show our guest today, the host of Octo Radio, a rewatch between worlds, co-host of Anytime with Ken and Alden, among, many other credits. You might have heard him on air via iHeartRadio or seen his writing on fandom.com. He's a regular tour de force in the Star Wars community and the first man we've ever had on the show. It's Alden Diaz, y'all.
The first man thing does get me in terms of pressure and in terms of wondering if I even want to represent them.
The thing about being the first man on this podcast, right, is it's an honor similar to being the first man on the moon. Not an easy feat. And so being the first man, really, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, Alden, you're like only one of two men that I even know, so.
Only
who's the other one?
That's it?
My father.
God?
Yeah, God. Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Isn't that three spirits in one? So that's a few extra bonus guys.
Damn, you got me there.
And technically, right, like Jesus isn't cis because God has no gender. And so when Jesus became Jesus, then Jesus assumed a gender Jesus had not had previously.
And these are canonical, definite things that we can both verify.
Hey, I've been
prove.
listening to On the Incarnation, so I'm like way into incarnational theology right now.
That's heavy.
I cannot tell you how little of a horse I have in that race.
I'm stuck on this being like the moon landing. That's
Yes,
the bigness
yes.
I'm stuck on, because what has the moon done for me? In my opinion, you're doing more.
Yeah, if you think about it, we give more to the world than Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the other guy. So,
in as much as I know both of your names and I don't know his.
I could tell you the names of all three people on the podcast right now. And the thing is, I don't know our exact listener metrics. I can make certain assumptions based on some numbers that I have, but I can only assume that the majority of the American public will be watching and listening to this episode when it airs.
Given that the majority of the American public today is much larger than the American public in like 1969 or whatever,
Nice.
we have a much larger audience than the moon landing.
As
Wow.
we well should.
You can't argue with that.
You can't. There's no possible way that you can disprove that. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about something a little newer, which is, one of the single most interesting bits of ideological writing within Star Wars, kind of in recent history. I'm going to be covering the main arc of the High Republic Phase 2. So that's bits from the adult Del Rey novels, the YA and middle grade stuff, and across some different comics as well. If you, as a listener, absolutely want to avoid spoilers for that stuff, consider this your warning. Go listen to the last one again or something. However, this could also serve as something of an introduction to the High Republic. Phase 2 is a prequel to phases 1 and 3. So if this all sounds spicy and interesting, give it a go. That's some pretty good books.
Among these is the only Star Wars book of canon that I have read.
They were giving out paperbacks of Light of the Jedi on... Wait, no. Different phase.
Oh, okay, well.
So Sophie has read a paperback of Light of the Jedi that I got from, I think, Celebration 2022.
Yes, you did, because I had one as well, and I was trying to give it away.
Yeah. Which, if they're going to give out a paperback, Light of the Jedi is a great choice because it is the gateway drug to the High Republic.
Yeah, it's a great introduction. And so if you want to pause here and then read 9 novels,
1, 2,
including middle grades to get here.
Well, 9 plus 6 plus at least one audio drama plus, some comics, probably about 30 issues, 40 issues. As a preface to our topic, I was raised Christian. I'm not anymore, but I was fairly devout when I was a teenager. And, I just kind of worked my way out of it. My parents were never super hardline. It was never something forced upon us. It was just, it was our culture. I'm not anymore. I'm a pretty hardline atheist, I guess. Alden, out of curiosity, what is your relationship to religion?
It's complicated if people still do that. I don't don't know if that's even a thing. I remember it's complicated, which sent shockwaves through the high school halls. If you ever used it.
With the Catholic Church. I don't know.
Yeah, but a situationship with several deities at the same time. But no, I've always explained it in as much as like I love a lot of the ideas of it, and I'm envious almost of people that have faith. I don't have any, and I feel like it's because I can't, which is a complicated thing. And I tend to throw around atheist and agnostic verbiage sometimes together. There's a lot of gotcha moments that happen with people where they're like, but Alden, you said that you believe in extraterrestrial life, and therefore that's a belief, and therefore you can't go. Okay.
Yeah, checkmate, liberal. You believe in aliens.
Yeah. All right, folks. That's fine. Because I don't think we're alone in the universe, but I don't necessarily see that as cosmic or magic or transcendental or extra planier or whatever. But yeah, I wish that I could. I was raised Catholic, and then when I was 6 years old, my mother made the mistake of asking me if I wanted to do my communion. I said no, because I didn't want to tell anyone. Exact quote from a child. I don't want to tell anyone what I've done wrong, because I knew what confession was, and I was not down with it because it just felt weird. And then middle school, I had a brief, like, maybe I could get involved in this youth group phase, and I did some killer speeches, but then I think that really is that I just wanted to talk and be listened to. Maybe not that I was actually involved in the dogma. And then in high school, I dabbled again for like a 6-month period, and then it got really homophobic, so I dipped.
I mean, good reason to dip. I think that there are ways in which, as a somewhat secular person, it is hard to get what religion offers. Like, I don't know, we're talking today about a really tight-knit community that is formed around their faith structure. And certainly in the year of our Lord, 2020, what year is it? 2024, it is so difficult for secular people to find community. And even for religious people, like religious queer people, it is hard for people to find nearby community.
It's really easy to have friends and intergenerational friendships and other things that are generally quite hard to get outside of church.
I know no old people these days.
Yeah.
I think if people had those sorts of communities, had those sorts of places they could go, I think people would feel less alienated in their day-to-day lives and by the internet and stuff. And that's really hard, because it's like, I don't want to have to believe in God, but it would be kind of nice if I had that.
Yeah. Like when I talk about the envy, it's like when you look at the people that are close to you, collaborators, coworkers, friends, siblings, lovers, whatever it is, and they have that. And there's an ability of them to say, well, I know it's going to be okay, or I know that there's a plan. Even if I don't know if there's a plan, I have faith that it'll work out. There's a really attractive serenity to that I think, especially to an anxious person, you start to really grab onto it, and you're like, but how? And sometimes that can actually turn into a little bit of anger. You start to project that.
yeah.
I know I've done that, where I'm like, you fool, it's not gonna be okay. And then I wish, I really do. And I guess as Star Wars fans, it's like, we get how it can cross into the realm of such devout learning and really respecting the work and being committed to it and knowing everything about it. And so fandoms, I think, explode in the wake of that, in the wake of realizing, well, I don't have this, so I'll go over here. I'll become a Star Wars fan. I'll become a Trekkie. I'll become a Whovian. I'll become a Tolkien head, like whatever it is. And I guess the difference, is that celebration is every couple of years and church is every week. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I go to a book club and it's like every month at best. Not the same. Not the same. Sophie, you are currently an actively Episcopalian.
Yeah,
Were you raised religious?
So I'm a practicing Episcopalian, right? I work in a church, yada, yada, yada. I grew up what I would characterize as evangelical. What they would prefer to be characterized as is charismatic. Charismatic just means you are really into, mind you, I'm going to put this in quotations as an active Christian, quote, the movement of the Holy Spirit, by which they mean rolling around on the ground, speaking in tongues, and feeling weird things. So basically, I think it's just like an attempt to differentiate themselves from those unfaithful evangelicals who don't believe enough in the movement of the Holy Spirit, which is the real sign of being a real Christian trademark. Also extremely homophobic, all that sort of fun stuff. So
that's really intense, man. That's really intense.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I kind of went from one extreme, which is extremely conservative, low church, speaking in tongues, to quite liberal, very high church, not charismatic. So like I very much switched ways, but it was very radical. It was very politicized in a way that current church is not, in that you would get sermons about like how we should kill the gays.
Oh.
So...
Okay. right. All right.
Always implied.
Right.
You can't just say that. But like, let's include this passage from scripture about how, you need to stone abominations and, how gay people are abominations. And that's definitely not a call to violence or anything. But
Yeah, just let everybody put those two things together. Nice and
Yeah,
casual.
they're a religion, so they can't talk about politics. It's not
Yeah.
Well,
politics.
you can't directly endorse a candidate.
It's just what types of people should and shouldn't exist in the world and
Yeah.
what maybe should be done with them.
We can't endorse a candidate. We can simply describe to you which candidate is going to bring about the end of days and which will deliver.
Right.
That's not an endorsement.
Oh yeah,
Your call at that point.
I know so many people who thought Obama was the Antichrist.
Back to Star Wars. This story does get a little bit complicated. There are a lot of names and a few events, and I don't have our real world connections written out exactly. This one's more vibes based. I'm going to tell the story of a religion, and we're going to see what we, especially Sophie, have to say about it. So today we're talking about extremism and belief. We're talking about opportunism and massacre and revenge, like really petty revenge. So our subject first really starts on Jedi, home to various religious sects, including and especially the Guardians of the Wills. We've talked about them before. Essentially, the Guardians are an order of monks clad in robes of black and red, preaching oneness with the Force. They worship in and defend the Temple of the Kyber as their solemn vow. The temple is this like huge fucking building that looms over Jeddah City, and it's full of like statues and crystals and just sort of all sorts of Force bullshit.
It's the Force Pantheon.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know how far back the Guardians date, but it's definitely a ways, because before the year 483 BBY, this is like almost 500 years before A New Hope, a Guardian of the Wills named Sashar Rold supposedly had a vision of this like vivid blue light. And with it comes a new understanding of the Force and his place within it. We don't know exactly what happened next, but apparently his new belief came into direct conflict with the other Guardians, and he was cast out of their order. So seeking refuge with the Force, he ended up on a new planet, one supposedly untouched by war or pain, named Dalna. Dalna was a planet outside of Republic jurisdiction in the Outer Rim, a part of a binary star system in the Dalnan sector. Without native residents, its small settler population depended on their agricultural harvest for their economy. By all accounts, Dalna was simple but beautiful. Dalna experienced an intense but short rainy season every few months. It was bluish and white from space and featured like waterfalls and purple and red forests, snow-capped volcanoes, and fields of beautiful wildflowers. So this is where Sashar Rold went. And it was on Dalna that he founded a religious order after his vision of the Force, dubbed the Path of the Open Hand. The Path lived together on land a ways outside of the small spaceport town Ferdin. They constructed a compound, living both in huts above the surface and under the ground in the natural cave networks on Dalna. They lived fairly insular lives, independent of other Dalnan settlements, besides visiting for the sake of proselyting. Children born to the Path, or littles, were taught the religion essentially from birth, and as a result of this separation and their religious seal, the wider public on Dalna grew wary of the Path of the Open Hand. Despite being from many backgrounds and species, Path members stuck out in crowds. They had beaded necklaces and tunics and robes of like blues and grays. They wore face paint pigmented from the shells of brickles, which are an arthropod native to Dalna. As a sign of their devotion to the Force, they wore 3 parallel wavy blue lines on their forehead.
This is going to have some weird parallels when we release this. And Ash Wednesday is a week and a half from now.
And what's the deal with Ash Wednesday?
Ash
Sophie?
Wednesday is like a holiday. It's the beginning of Lent, which is when you're all sad about Jesus. You go in the morning and you have this little service. It's called the imposition of ashes, and they put a little cross of ashes on your forehead, and you wear that around for the rest of the day.
So many of these things sound so incredibly theatrical, both in context and out, but even with zero context, the imposition of ashes is like my concept album. And that's pretty good in terms of things we wear or put on our faces or whatever. As you were describing the Path garb, and we've all seen a bunch of art of them, and there's pictures of the compound and lots of concept art and things, but they rank pretty high in terms of cult aesthetic.
Oh yeah.
I think they're dripping.
Some of the vibes are good. Whomst among us does not want to live in like a utopian commune? God, I wish, they could do to be a little less like metatextually homophobic.
Eleanor, you're moving to Portland. Portland is like a commune.
Be the change you want to see
Portland
in the world.
is like a big 600,000 person commune.
The dream. Well, no, and it is like playing into these really idealistic concepts of the religious order that goes out and buys a plot of land and just chills for a while.
To the point where most Dalnans at this point are like, a little weird? Sure. ultimately an issue? Not really.
These guys are over there and I'm over here and I don't want to deal with whatever they're up to, but whatever.
They come into town. It's not like they're entirely
Right.
cut off. So they make face enough that I think they put people at ease, even though the garb and the paint and everything does make heads turn.
Right. They are pretty much harmless.
Yeah.
For now.
For now. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned utopia. I pulled up the root words here just so I can remember them. It comes from utopos, meaning the good place, and utopos, meaning the place that cannot be. And so when you find that dichotomy is like utopia, yes, and we all kind of put it in that connotation, but it's also so good, it can't be real. Something's going on.
So Marx was right when he wrote that we need, historical materialism and scientific communism rather than utopian communism is what you're saying.
I think that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure if that's what Disney Lucasfilm is saying, but let's go.
I assume that's also what Disney Lucasfilm is saying, personally.
Well, I mean,
it came to me
if you
in a
listen
dream.
to like Ron DeSantis,
Kennedy.
If you listen to like Ron DeSantis, Florida Republicans, like this is exactly what Disney is
Disney
saying.
is injecting the Marxian mind virus into your children directly with a syringe.
Oh yeah.
So the path, they are living communally, they are living off the land. The path believes that the Force kind of always seeks to find balance within itself. The Force provides for their community and for the galaxy at large, and so they should look after one another with the same sort of dedication and pacifism. This led to the idea of the gift freely given, which is this path concept wherein one offers food or medicine or support to those who need it with an open hand.
So they're just space Mennonites. Very agrarian. You might have seen them. They wear kind of old-fashioned clothes that a lot of us find outdated. Generally very generous, very community-oriented. They are extremely pacifist. Like they will go to jail before they join the military if there's a draft.
Space.
Well, yes. And they live off the land. They're largely agricultural. So they're space Mennonites.
The path is like pretty often strapped for resources. I mean, they're just a bunch of dudes who don't do a lot of trade, but they welcome anyone onto their compound, from like locals to war refugees. Additionally, though, and this is where it gets a bit, the path believed that anyone who would wield or spiritually tap into the Force was committing a grave abuse. They are stealing from the Force. And because of that, the Force would naturally find balance. To lift a rock or be guided by the Force in combat would be to harm the natural order of things, and horrible things would happen in the galaxy as a consequence. It's like the butterfly effect, but it's for like doing a double jump in Lego Star Wars. The path was mandated to refrain from engaging directly in any manipulation of the Force. Any child of the Path of the Open Hand who exhibited a natural Force sensitivity was cast out of the community as a transgressor.
God damn it. It took us 3 seconds. I'm like, oh, here's my lay wholesome Mennonite farm commune. And then it's like, oh, we do space homophobia.
And that gets kind of to the heart of it, which is the path has these ideas about the Force. And, we could litigate whether or not those are true, but like some people are naturally sensitive to the Force. This is a type of person who is born and exists and live their lives. Force sensitivity defines the way that Force sensitives move through the world. The Jedi offer this chance to embrace that and take advantage of it. And some people don't like that kind of person. Mm-hmm. And we are getting rid of them. We're doing Star Wars bigotry.
There are no past echoes to any of our experiences with religion as children here.
No. None whatsoever.
No certain types of people that were not allowed in anyway.
Yeah, sent out of their home because they were a certain type of person? No, absolutely.
Certainly.
I don't know anyone. This has happened to. Yeah.
I don't know anyone like that.
And this begins a long theme that will permeate everything with the path. Them absolving themselves of guilt or even separating themselves from the object permanence of their own action. Mm-hmm. To them, it's not autonomous. Like we are not doing this. This is how the Force wants it. We are but an arm of it, and we're just respecting the way that it is.
You see, that's interesting because that's kind of a way of thinking that I know a lot of conservative evangelicals share. Well, it's not bigotry. It's just like, this is how God wants it to be, is that we hate gay people and apparently, put up razor wire to kill immigrants.
That's what God wants. God told me.
God's plan.
He texted me last night.
They go so far as also to imbue all of their actions with, they're trying to prevent disasters, right? This is all like safety and disaster prevention, and they inject this idea into all of their teachings. If we don't do this, then this will surely happen because that's how the Force works. So in their mind, taking that little Force sensitive and dumping them somewhere might actually save people too. So they also get to feel decent decent about it. Even when they do have moments of doubt, it's, well, lightning could come down, or the Force will do X, Y, and Z to us and everyone else, or it'll be random. It'll be somewhere else in the galaxy, so they never have to prove anything. That's the other thing.
This used to be kind of a trend among a certain type of conservative, is being like, oh, this hurricane happened because of the gays.
Yes, the Force sensitives of real life.
God is punishing Florida.
If you are gay, that cup across the table from you, just try it. I mean,
congratulations to everyone listening that this applies to.
I mean, it works in Star Wars too. Sabine Wren was a lesbian and then she used the Force. So
and
she learned.
Training before she met Shin, unsuccessful. Training after she met Shin, I'm just saying.
Making my heart sing, Alden. Good point.
The evidence is right there.
All right. The path was governed by a council of elders, several among the community who were, oldest and wisest, but leading that council was a person called the Herald. They are chosen for their devotion to the Force, as well as a degree of reliability and decision-making capability. For the next century, the path of the open hand continued on. Sashar Rold presumably died, I don't know, but the path was led by its successive heralds. They lived off the land they worked, and they practiced their faith, and they were reasonably peaceful. They largely kept to themselves. But yeah, that's not gonna stay. We rejoin the path at a pretty normal time. Missionary trips into Dalnan settlements, daily meditation gatherings in the morning and evening, and they are governed by a man named Worth Plouth. Worth was a Nautolan, a green amphibious dude. He's like fucking Kit Fisto. His early life was apparently a violent one, as Nautilans have these long head tresses, these tentacles, but Worth's are all shorn off, cut close to his head, ending in stumps. Worth came to Dalna and found the path when he was looking for somewhere that he'd be accepted, and he set up a life there. He married a woman named Opari, and they had a kid together, a girl named Kor. At some point, Kor showed some Force sensitivity, but instead of sending her away, as was typical, Worth had become the Herald, so he covered up her sensitivity and just kind of ignored it. The Herald seems like a pretty normal leader for the path. He was devoted, and he looked after his community. And then someone new came to Dalna as a refugee, Elysia Zeveron, a human woman, and she was welcomed into the fold of the path like any other. We don't know a lot about Elysia's prior life, besides a little about her childhood in the core world, as well as that as a young adult, she got involved in some kind of organized crime, performing robberies and heists and shit. Elysia was beautiful and charismatic, and she was smart. She knew how to talk to people and get them on her side. So she joins the path and she learns their ways. She took well to their Force belief and was accepted into the community as an equal until one day in 385 BBY, she experienced a vision of bright blue light. And I'm going to quote directly for the next bit. She saw the light in the shape of a messenger, a being created of pure Force who taught her how to share life and listen and be one with the Force, so much that her small garden had bloomed overnight. Her harmony with the Force was so pure, it bled out of her and into anyone blessed enough to be in her presence. Everyone listened when she spoke, from the youngest little to the most wrinkled elder. The path venerated Elysia and gave more and more credence to her ongoing visions. The Herald's wife, Opari, fell seriously ill, but was miraculously kept alive with treatment that Elysia gave. Despite already having their Herald, the path gave Elysia the role of leadership and a new title to mark her as a prophet of ongoing Force revelation. Elysia Zeveron became the mother of
Mommy?
the path.
Sorry. Mommy?
So she's the mother of the path of the open hand.
She's like
Mother? Yes.
mother. She's
Yeah.
very mother.
Something scale on the mother
Yes,
quick.
exactly.
Something.
It is worth noting that the mother's visions were essentially a lie. Elysia Zeveron was a con artist. She is in it for any gain that she can manage.
Yes. Yes, I love her so much more now. I'm assuming because you're American in the year of our Lord, as we discussed earlier, 2024, you have heard of these lovely things called mega churches.
I might be familiar.
A mega church is defined as any church over 2,500 Sunday attendees, right? So these are really big churches, and there are about 1,200 of them in the United States alone, 4,000 around the world. And while most of these places are probably mostly fine, the ones that you're probably thinking of are almost certainly not. There are places like, Eagle Mountain International Church, Joel Osteen, you know who that is? Creflo Dollar, my favorite named one.
Creflo Dollar, a Star Wars name if ever I heard one.
It's kind of a glubshido, isn't it?
The Creflo Dollar definitely is like a Mos Eisley level guy. He rolls with Greedo and them.
Yeah, he's in the background of The Force Awakens when they walk into Maz Kanata's castle.
When you look at those locations, you see a lot of shady professions come covered, odds are somebody there is pushing some sort of faith or is trying to con people.
Right.
Somebody's a mega church pastor, yeah.
There are 3 people there who actively run churches. There's a missionary in the back getting fucking turned. Yeah, pretty much. Sophie, what's like the appeal of a mega church? Like, why would you go to that instead of your little local one?
So there's this thing going on in the United States and in other Western countries called secularization, which you can probably guess what that means by the name, in that,
Oh, Captain, my captain.
yeah, people are not so much into religion anymore. Interestingly, still quite spiritual, but not so much into religion. So this means that a lot of like small churches, local churches are just like, no one goes here anymore. Time to stop existing. And I know people this has happened to. Like my grandparents have this church that they went to for like 20 years, just closed down because it didn't have anyone going to it anymore because they live in a rural area. And instead of, driving 40 minutes into town to actually go to church that they agree with, they started going to online church. And the thing about online churches is they have this thing generally called the prosperity gospel, which is believe in Jesus, make money.
You send $50 to the pastor on the TV.
And it shall be rewarded unto you tenfold.
Yeah, and then you supposedly are going to get back $500 from God.
Yes.
Not from the pastor.
Emailed,
God's PayPal.
mailed to you directly from God.
What would a pastor even do with so much money, Sophie?
Well, the thing, I've known a lot of pastors. My dad was at one time when I was quite small. And most pastors, use it for like food, keeping the church building up. But in these really big churches, you are bringing in so much money that it goes beyond that. People like Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar are buying private jets and multiple mansions and golf courses.
Right, you're getting on the private jet and flying from one end of the private mansion to the other end of the private mansion.
I mean, with how big some of these churches are, you need the private jet to fly from one end to the other. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this as a scholar of sociology and also religion. Mega churches are bad for religion and also quite bad for society.
Because they're scams or...
Because they're scams, because the type of social interaction that they produce is not the kind that a regular church produces, right? Like in a normal church, you go down to your local whatever branch of whatever denomination, right? And there are like 200 people there, max. And then you all go after church and you have coffee together and you talk to people. In mega churches, it's very much like almost a service-oriented model, right?
Putting service-oriented model in my Hinge bio.
Like you just go in, you have like a rock concert and a 40-minute lecture, and then you leave. And mostly you don't talk to anyone. It's very much like big box Christianity, right? You treat church the same way as you treat Walmart.
Sure, you go to the Sam's Club and you get...
You go there once a week,
dollar.
you get the thing you need, and you leave, versus community building, which is kind of the traditional model of religious interaction. So I see these as very harmful in a lot of ways.
So yeah, the mother's a scammer. Keep that in mind. The mother claimed that part of her visions was a mandate to take the path off of Dalna and into the stars to spread the word of the Force and to grow their faith. She used off-world connections and met with generous benefactors who apparently believed in the path, and these benefactors fund their ventures. Construction was begun on a flagship, several hundred meters long. This is like 300 plus meters, dubbed the Gaze Electric, designed to serve as a mobile home and as a temple for the path when it was completed. Private plane.
We need this for the church.
Right.
So let me get this straight. These guys are the Mennonite Evangelical Mormon Sea Org. Dude, I just like their Scientology ship. That's my favorite thing of them so far.
It really is a Scientology ship. Anyway, with the goal of expansion came a refocusing of path doctrine, placing more of an emphasis on the imbalance that was caused in the Force by those who misused it. The mother stressed that many other Force religions specifically abuse the Force and are like actively harming it. That it isn't enough for the path not to use the Force, but that it ought to be brought into balance across the galaxy. She coined a mantra that would come to be repeated across the path compound, insisting that the Force will be free.
Cool slogan, I'll say that.
It's catchy. The mother is out here turning the path from this fairly isolated belief structure into essentially a reactionary one. Like it is, we are the ones doing this correctly. Everyone else is doing it wrong. I disagree with your lifestyle.
We are the one true church.
Right.
Everyone loves to do that, right? Like the Mormons love to do that. American evangelicals love to be like, oh, if you're not this, then you go to hell. Reformed people just love to be like, oh, if you're not Calvinist, you go to hell.
That's true, actually.
That's true.
verifiable.
That's actually true. Yeah. Such much arrogance, first of all, to assume that you know the full truth of an unknowable thing. Like, right, even the Force, right, is like beyond and inside of everyone and everything, and it gives everything its life. And like to pretend that, oh, well, we have the exactly perfect understanding of that and no one else has any clue is very arrogant.
That's the revelation that Luke gets to after he lost his nephew and after he lost his iteration of the Order, is that he becomes fixated on the idea of vanity, and that the prequel era Jedi fell, and there was this idea of, well, the light has no one now. There are no protectors. There's nothing. And he tells Rey to say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. And he becomes really driven by what he perceives as, and he's right to a certain degree, of his own arrogance as a mythic figure, but then also starts to question whether or not his removal from the scenario is better. And he's asking questions that the Jedi of this time were not asking, but the Path was starting to ask them, or at least Alicia was internally, and that's why she was so good at playing this manipulative game. I mean, she brings a little bit of a spice and a little zing and, you know, some beauty and some even wit to what was, up until that point, a very dull sort of, let's all just be peaceful, very, you know, the vibe that you get in a garden. I don't know how to describe that vibe because I don't want to knock gardening.
Luke was like InfoWars, like he's asking the questions no one else is asking.
He learned that eventually. Yeah, and I think there is something interesting that in terms of canon, we know there's an Old Republic and it's been referenced, but we don't have stories there at this time. So in terms of where we have stories, this is the furthest point, and the sequels are the furthest point the other way. And there are these two people at the centers of two faiths, and they are the only people really interrogating either of them. And for Alicia, it leads her down this way, and for Luke, it goes the other way. And they've done a good job. I think people will hopefully by the end of this be like, damn, that is really interesting if they haven't read it. But it's always just been, oh, the Jedi and the Sith, the Jedi and the Sith. And the Jedi and the Path really has emerged as like a separate analysis altogether. It's not really like Order and Passion. It's definitely similar revelations. It's who has a right, which we'll talk about when we get into the convocation and all that fun stuff.
So the Force will be free, and this freedom is extended to Force artifacts as well. This isn't something we see super often in the movies and in the television, but sometimes Star Wars has objects that are basically just magic. I mean, you have something with significance in the Force. It has like the ability to enhance or dampen the abilities of a Force user, or it houses or preserves like the essence of a Force user, like the helmet of the long dead Sith Lord Momin. Darth Vader fucking has that thing, and it talks to him, and it writes up architectural designs for his castle. This helmet of this dead guy.
How does it write them, just out of curiosity?
Oh, it pops itself on someone on the head of just like an Imperial officer.
No.
Yeah.
And like possesses him.
And I think does kill them.
Well, that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
No, I do like this though, because relics are like a big deal in like the Catholic part of Christianity, where you'll have like, this is a piece of the true cross, or like, this is a bone from Saint Joan of Arc or something. And it like, sometimes people will report like them bleeding or things as like a miracle. And I think that's quite fun.
Star Wars loves an object. And I mean, the older the object is, the better. According to the Mother, the existence of many of these objects is a grave offense against the Force.
Oh, so she is a Calvinist.
So Alicia made a sort of task force, a group she dubbed the Children of the Open Hand. It was composed of a handful of young adult members, including the Herald's daughter Cor and Cor's girlfriend, an Evereni named Yana Rowe. We'll come back to her. Publicly, to the Path community, the children were to travel off-world and to set a path for the religion when it moved off of Dalna. You know, spreading the word, offering gifts, all of it. The children were actually recruited to find and steal, sometimes through violence, rare artifacts imbued with the Force in order to bring them back to Dalna. The artifacts are stolen either to be destroyed or kept underground as long as they can't be used. The Herald apparently like really resisted this change, but eventually, you know, he gave in.
Destroyed.
Yeah, according to the Mother.
Cool.
Just like millennia old Sith or Jedi or sorcerer objects or whatever.
No, I get it, because there was a shit ton of that happened during the Reformation as well, where they're like, you superstitious Catholics, we're going to burn your fragment of the true cross because that's satanic.
This is also when the Mother caught the attention of a young man named Axel Greylark. Axel was the son of Kion Greylark, who would become the Supreme Chancellor. Axel resented politics and the Jedi most of all, as he blamed them for his father's death. So he was highly amenable to Path doctrine. He practiced their faith for a short while before tiring and falling away from it, but he still remained friends with the Mother and would serve as a high-value connection for her in the future. So some rich people really like the Path.
Some rich people really like American evangelicals because they get people to vote for Republicans.
Now, to explain to you the next part of this story, I have to give you an idea of what the canon galaxy looked like at this time, because shit was pretty different from what we see in the prequels. So, to get across the galaxy, you need a hyperdrive. This pops you into hyperspace, which is a different dimension from real space, allowing you faster than light travel. Okay, this stuff is kind of dense, so we'll get through it as best we can. For a hyperspace jump, you have to have jump coordinates, and you gotta know where to go, because you can't just pop off in any old direction. Every celestial object in real space leaves what's called a mass shadow in hyperspace. So when you're making a hyperspace jump, you're not just in danger of colliding with objects in space, you can also run into a mass shadow, which, might just bump you into real space, but it seems like that's unpredictable enough that it is not advised. It's not what you want on a day-to-day basis. So you gotta know where and when you can jump. And ever since the hyperdrive was created, people have been figuring out routes that you can use to get around. In the distant past, hyperspace prospectors would jump into space, usually in a calculated direction, and then lay down a hyperspace beacon. Rinse and repeat until you have these winding, complicated hyperspace routes that anyone with a hyperworthy spaceship can use to get from Bespin to Chandrila or whatever. Popping in and out of hyperspace, potentially tedious, but better than literally not being able to go anywhere. Sometimes this led to the discovery of habitable worlds that were later settled. Sometimes it connected core worlds with indigenous populations that would assimilate into galactic society. I'm sure there was also colonialism, but that is not the point of this episode. Eventually, as the galaxy was more thoroughly explored and hyperspace research got better and better, more complicated multi-jump routes could often be phased out for the sake of these more direct, more efficient hyperlanes. Super hyperlanes were the most prominent of these and became massively popular for moving beings and resources like the Corellian trade spine or the Hydean Way. The planets positioned on or near these lanes grew richer and busier, but because old jump-by-jump routes that took you past, Jeddah were less popular, the worlds that benefited from that prior traffic saw severe economic decline. So anyway, the point is that for more hyperspace routes to be found, it takes work. It takes time. So the further you get into the past from the Clone War, the smaller the charted galaxy was from the perspective of the core world. Communications relays and hyperspace routes were significantly more limited. But not too long before Lycia Zevron became the mother of the path, there was a boom in prospecting work being done, leading to what was called the Great Hyperspace Rush. This is obvious, historical inspiration. We have rushes, we have prospectors. Oh, we're being cute. It was a scramble to map the unmapped, to claim hyperspace routes for your own or to be sold. Private entities poured tremendous resources into mapping hyperspace, some getting especially rich, but no one put as much into this rush as the Galactic Republic, which was experiencing its own swell of prosperity and felt a drive to expand into the Outer Rim, and they wanted the hyperlanes to be publicly available.
This is them building the interstate highway system. They're like, we're gonna have commerce, we're gonna have trade.
Almost exactly, yes.
So we all think about Eisenhower when we think about the freeways. Who do we think about in the Republic? Who built the hyperlanes?
In as much as specifics you have the Santecas and you have the Graphs are two. There are many different families that are hyperspace prospectors. That's just a popular job that you can have.
It's a cool job.
Yeah, and but the Graphs and the Santecas are kind of the Rockefeller types of doing that.
Yeah, I would really love to know which chancellor passed the bill that said that this stuff is, publicly, that would be really fucking cool. Super hyper routes don't seem like they are a recent development by any means. So I would assume that stuff is at least 1,000 years out, potentially pre-Old Republic, but also, fuck it. What if that kind of accessibility was a Rusan Reformation thing? That seems perfectly likely. Anyway, so the government creates expedition teams of Republic Pathfinders as a way to explore the galaxy and establish new trade routes. They chart hyperspace routes, they lay down communication buoys, and they report back to the Republic. Teams were generally assigned with EX communication droids that would travel through hyperspace in short, safe jumps as scouts and messengers. They are explicitly like a Pony Express droid. We're going to focus on one specific hyperspace prospector right now, a non-Republic unaffiliated fellow named Radicaz Dobbs.
Great name.
Yeah,
also a very mega church preacher name.
Radicaz Dobbs is a more believable name than Graflo Dollar.
Graflo Dollar. Although Graftflow Dollar would be quite funny.
Graflo Dollar.
I would at least want to know what Radicaz Dobbs has to say.
Yeah,
I would hear this man out on name alone. I'd be like, "What's your story?" I just gotta know.
A man named Radicaz would call me a slur. I just know it. No fucking way.
The Dobbs is a little red statey.
Radicaz, Sunshine to his friends, was a navigator, smuggler, gambler, and a bastard. I fucking hate Sunshine. He was working with prospector Spence Lefbrook and Lefbrook's son when they discovered a paradise planet planet in the middle of uncharted wild space, a world spoken of in prospector stories as the mysterious Planet X.
Lazy name.
Yeah, it does leave something to be desired, but you get why a bunch of fucking people in a bar somewhere would name it. They'd be like, I don't know.
Oh,
what
it's
the fuck
Planet
we gonna call it?
X.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Planet X. Covered in trees and native animals and sweet fruit, everything on Planet X is alive in the Force. Even the soil and the atmosphere. All of it forms this delicate ecosystem to nourish what's on the planet and to keep it safe from off-worlds who would misuse it. Speaking of, Sunshine and the Leftbrooks find this planet, but the Leftbrook ship is damaged in the hazardous atmosphere, forcing them to land and abandon their craft. Sunshine landed his ship too and agreed to get them off planet in exchange for a guaranteed half of whatever reward they get for finding this legendary world. And then Sunshine stops off at some frontier planet without a spaceport, kicks the Leftbrooks off his ship, and abandoned them there so he could take all the Planet X money for himself. Again, Sunshine is a huge dick.
Radicaz, quote, Sunshine, unquote, Dobbs, parentheses, huge dick, close parentheses.
Radicaz, quote unquote, Sunshine, quote unquote, that bastard, Dobbs. But I mean, I think I remember this correctly. I'm pretty sure people don't believe Sunshine about Planet X. So he still has these hyperspace routes, but he has to go back to gambling and smuggling and stealing rare objects, just trying to make as much money as he could to pay off debt that he'd accrued with the Hutts. This is when he's contacted by the Path of the Open Hand. The mother and her children have set sights on 3 artifacts that serve as some kind of conduit for the Force. The Rod of Seasons, the Rod of Daybreak, and the seemingly lost Rod of Ages. You can kind of forget about that one. So having heard about him as some fucking guy who sells expensive stuff, the Path gets in touch with Sunshine. Sunshine travels to Dalna along with his stuff, hoping to make any money. He gets there and he's introduced to the mother, and he is transfixed by her. He felt something shift, and he knew that he would work very hard to make this woman happy. A smile from her would be enough.
Simp.
No, I get it, man. I get it, Radicaz. Like, Radicaz, I understand why you got rizzed up into doing cult stuff. I do.
Yeah. Sometimes we look into the past and we say I'd be too smart for that. That would work on me. The mother would work on me. He shows the mother and the herald various artifacts he'd acquired, an ancient Sith bracelet, some kind of chalice, etc., mostly junk. Sunshine admits that the Rod of Ages is basically a myth, which disappoints the mother, and she says that nothing Sunshine has echoes with the Force, which is when Sunshine, trying so hard not to disappoint this woman, offers her just kind of this weird fucking thing he's got, a much too large gem-like glowing purple orb, an object he found and snatched during the time he and the Leftbrooks spent on Planet X. And the mother is delighted. She gasps when she sees the orb and claims that it sings and is alive with the Force. And in exchange for that, still spellbound with the mother, Sunshine offers to stay with the Path to help liberate more Force objects with the children.
I like that the mother is like Origin of Alexandria and immediately becomes obsessed with a glowing orb. So Origin of Alexandria is kind of the first theologian, right? The first real Christian theologian. And he had, a lot of ideas that are very foundational, but also some kind of fucking wacky ones. And among these is the idea that when you go to heaven, you become a glowing orb. Why does he believe this? Well, because he's influenced by all these Greek philosophers and geometricians who are like, what's the perfect shape? An orb. And so therefore he's like, we go to heaven, we become perfect, and therefore we become an orb.
Yeah, it is like a deeply Aristotelian idea. It's like, I don't know, you're a ball now.
Yeah, I could be sold by the end of this. If it was when you die, you're going to be a magical orb, I'd be like, this is the best sales pitch I've heard so far. I'm going to start cherry picking my favorite things from throughout this, and then I'll become one of those.
I'm not like a history of religions expert. Has anyone ever done that before with religion? They just took the stuff that they like? That's a great idea. So they're going to liberate some Force objects, and they do. On the mother's orders, the children stole the Rod of Seasons from the royal family of the planet Hinestia Prime. And when it was discovered that the rod was gone, the royal family did not like that, and they contacted the Republic to demand Jedi involvement in the case. By all accounts, there was almost no trace of the culprits on Hinestia, besides a Port Authority log marking a missionary ship in the capital city, and a corresponding rumor about a Force artifact buyer on Dalna. So, in 382 BBY, Jedi Master Zala Makri and her Padawan travel to Dalna, landing in Ferdin, and by chance, the Padawan, a Pantoran young adult named Kevmo, runs into Path members, a group of the Path's kids, and their caretaker, a teenage girl named Marta.
The Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transportation Authority.
It's Marda, not Marta. Marta was the younger cousin of Yana Rowe, a member of the Children. For Yana, who was a little older when they were given refuge on the compound as kids, the path became a reasonably safe place to live and very little more. She worked with the Children as something to do, and the secrecy didn't bother her because she was never a believer. She was skeptical of the faith and planned for a long time to leave, ideally with her girlfriend and cousin. But Marta was a fierce believer in the religion, and more than anything, wanted to be a member of the Children with Yana, understanding them as a missionary group like they claimed to be, and not like essentially a band of covert ops. Marta saw sharing the path with others as her calling and believed it was her role to bring people into the fold any way she could. But for now, she was commanded by the mother to nurture the sparks of belief in the hearts of the kids. She's out in Ferdin, and she meets Kevmo, and the two are bewitched with one another, you know. They're teenagers, they're attracted to one another, and Marta offers Kevmo a flower, a gift freely given. Kevmo levitated it with the Force, thinking that's going to delight the path. They're going to be so excited. The path members are fucking horrified. Marta especially, she tells him off for stealing from the Force. The two argue about their respective philosophies, and Kevmo lets slip that he's a Jedi, and Marta fucking dips. She's tense, she's embarrassed, and she is like appalled at having met a Jedi, you know, a member of this group that is so ideologically opposed to the path. Marta goes back to the compound and is told to invite the Jedi there as well. Keep your enemies close. Despite their misgivings, Kevmo is entranced with Marta and the path. He feels like they kind of missed the mark on some things, but he sees their peaceful lifestyle as beautiful and somewhat holy. Kevmo's master doesn't lose sight of their goal, but the mother avoids a meeting with them. The mother at this point is kind of a recluse. She spent a significant amount of her time alone.
Pondering the orb.
Pondering the orb. Literally, alone in her chambers. She's never apart from this glowing purple thing, and she is obsessed with it. She calls it this gift from the Force. Anyway, Kevmo visited the path compound often, and the mother encouraged Marta to continue to learn from the Jedi. You know, the mother wants to keep tabs on these guys. Kevmo and Marta struck up a budding romance, and when the rainy season hits, you know, huge fucking floods, Kevmo goes to the path compound to help protect the members living there, at one point using the Force to free someone from a collapsing tunnel. Marta is disturbed by the use of the Force, but is grateful for Kevmo's help. Meanwhile, Marta feels like she's growing in her faith, you know, she's gaining more and more of an ability to evangelize. So she asks the mother if she can be a member of the Children, but the mother unceremoniously shoots down this request, which crushes Marta. Still, Marta wants to believe, she wants to find what's right for her, so, you know, looking for meaning and purpose. When Yana tells Marta that she's planning to leave the path with her girlfriend Kor, Marta sees it as an opportunity. She decides she ought to go with Yana to Jeddah to establish the path there to thrive among the religious fervor of the people. The Herald thinks that's a good idea, to petition for a path seat on the convocation of the Force. We'll come back to what that is later. But the mother doesn't like it. Marta begs, but the mother refuses this request as well, saying that it isn't her will that the path be on Jeddah. And Marta's a little bit troubled that the mother is speaking for herself and her desire, and not speaking for the Force. Anyway, Yana and Kor are planning to leave, but the mother doesn't like that either. So they go out on their last mission, a trip to the planet Thelge aboard Sunshine Dobbs' ship to steal some Force necklace from some rich people with very tight security. When the Children get inside, they are attacked. Someone tipped off the security, and while Yana makes it out alive, the other Children are killed, including Kor. Yana returns to Sunshine's ship, and he all but says that the mother had him warn security that the Children were all intended to die on this mission. Yana threatens Sunshine, furious at the loss of her partner and the manipulations of the mother, whom, upon return to Dalna, she vows to expose as a fraud and a grifter.
Mother set them up to like get killed.
The mother fucking sets them up. Yana's supposed to die. Kor was supposed to die, and she did.
This homophobia.
Yeah. Yana goes to Marta to tell her about the double cross, but Marta doesn't understand. She doesn't listen. She says that it must have been an accident. She agrees to leave Dalna with Yana, you know, to preach off-world and to be there for her cousin, but that plan doesn't really pan out. When Yana returned to Dalna, it was via the spaceport, where Kevmo and Master Macri are. They see Sunshine too, who they haven't met beforehand, but they recognize him from recent intelligence briefings, specifically naming him a suspicious character. You know, Sunshine's killed folks. Like, this is not a good guy. So they see this as their shot. They infiltrate the Path compound to finally get the answers they'd been seeking for weeks. The Jedi discover a room under the mother's cottage filled with the stolen prizes of children, but they are caught. And for the first time, they set eyes on the mother. The Jedi demand her arrest. They insist on taking the stolen goods back to their owners, and the Herald's retinue open fire on them. You know, they're fucking Jedi. They defend themselves. They got their little lightsabers out. You're not going to be able to shoot them. They're Jedi.
Unless you have a lot of guys.
But the mother still holds the purple gem, which throbs with this light like a heartbeat before falling to the floor and cracking open. It wasn't a jewel that Sunshine picked up on Planet X. but an egg. What came out was barely formed, blue, iridescent, kind of gummy, but it launched itself at the Jedi. This animal, native to Planet X, feeds on the living force, which exists on their planet in abundance, but out in the galaxy, the way they feed is by preying on other force-sensitive animals, sentient and not, including Jedi. As it fed on their energy, it grew into a small clawed quadruped with writhing tentacles around its sharp-toothed mouth. Everyone's a little bit force sensitive technically, so it fills pretty much everyone with unease. But to those who are most sensitive, the simple presence of this animal would cause madness and panic and hallucinations. The Jedi screamed, they cried, they pleaded in terror. They ran for their lives as they were, from their perspective, cut off from the very force itself. The creature chased after them and grew supernaturally quick as it drank the energy from the Jedi, turning their bodies into calcified, crumbling stone. Kevmo dies in Marta's arms as she cries in desperation, just unable to do anything. Racked with grief, Marta takes Kevmo's lightsaber for herself. Yeah.
That's fucked up, man.
Yeah.
Dust you are, and to dust you shall return indeed. It's a shame you're releasing this when it is instead of 1 week, because it would coincide with Ash Wednesday, and that would be a great title. I like that the kind of evil force monster turns people into pillars of salt. That's really biblical.
Yana goes to the Herald. She tells him that the mother killed his daughter. The Herald is horrified, but having seen the power of this creature and pretty reasonably fearing retaliation from the Jedi after they discover 2 of their own missing, he decides to continue to align himself with the mother to take power for himself if he can play it just right. The Herald names the creature a gift from the Force, and the mother dubs it the Great Leveler, claiming she saw it through a vision. In the confusion around the Jedi, Yana picked up the Rod of Seasons, and the Leveler took great interest in the rod. It fucking followed her around the room, and the Herald, seeing an opportunity to levy his influence, declares that the Leveler has chosen Yana as its champion, and Yana decides, like the Herald, to play it cool, to take a piece of the mother's power for herself in the hopes that Yana can turn it back on her someday. The mother is enraged by this lapse in her control. She wanted the Leveler to just be hers, but she saves face. She praises Yana. The Herald announces that the path will leave Delna, that they'd set out on the newly spaceworthy Gaze Electric. And the mother, desperate to have the last word, tells her people that the Force will be free. Marta goes to the mother after watching Kevmo die, and the mother tells her that the Jedi abused the Force, and the Leveler returned balance. It is a pure agent of the Force. It's that, the hurricane came because of the Gaze. This bad thing is happening, not because I did it, I'm washing my hands of it, but it happened because these people were bad.
And the inherent irony, the tragic irony of their methodology and their beliefs, why the Jedi are wrong, is that they see the Jedi as taking this naturally occurring thing and perverting it to their ends. Whereas this is a creature that does not have an opinion. It just knows that it's hungry and has one thing that can service its diet. And at this point, it's a puppy. And they take this creature and they use it for their ends. And most of them see nothing wrong there. They don't see the connective tissue. And the ones that do, Alicia, of course, they're going to, manipulate and try to assuage people, but it is entirely a microcosm of the entire problem. The fact that this creature doesn't just get to exist on Planet X, where up to this point, it has not been a factor in terms of galactic conflict.
I mean, using things that are connected to the Force, they are using the Leveler. They are taking what is essentially a big creepy dog out of its natural habitat where it can only feed as much as it needs to, kind of at all
Aren't
times.
They kind of abusing Force by doing that, sort of?
Yeah, kind of. They're certainly abusing an animal, which is part of the Force. The Leveler at all times that we see it is always emaciated, always starving, always desperate to feed. Yeah, that's creepy. Yeah, that's horrifying, but it's man, put this thing on the fucking Force planet. This is where it belongs, clearly.
Maybe on Planet X, they're like dogs. They're happy.
Yeah,
they're just hanging
cute.
around.
Maybe
and
they just have little, their mouth tentacles aren't horrifying. Their eyes aren't sunken. It's just kind of vibing.
If you lived on Force Planet, you could have it as a pet.
So yeah, we have Marta going to the mother for comfort, for guidance. And the mother says, it's really sad, but they had it coming. And Marta agrees. The Leveler must be with them to prevent further harm in the galaxy from abuse to the Force. She rationalizes Kevmo's loss. She deals with it by blaming the Order for indoctrinating him into a dangerous and false ideology. Her faith in the path only intensifies with this trauma, and in an effort to utilize this faith, the Mother names Marta as the path's guide. And so Marta gets what she wants after all. The path, the Gaze Electric, the Mother all go to Jeddah to spread the word and meet with the convocation of the Force.
It is kind of depressing that this happens to Marta where she gets radicalized because of this event, because kind of before that, like, she was de-radicalizing almost. Like, you know, it's very difficult for certain prejudices to survive contact with an actual person. And she was like almost coming around to like, oh, well, maybe the Jedi are people. And then this happens and suddenly it's like, oh, time for me to go extreme Jonestown mode.
Well, yeah, this is one of those things we see in the political landscape of
the world, right? Like, we have this whole thing in political science right now why it's bad that people don't live next to people with opposite like political views anymore. Increasingly, people with different political views are spatially, what we would call spatially segregated. You know, more liberal people living in the city or in the inner suburbs, and more conservative people living in the exurbs and out in the country. And because everyone doesn't just live next to each other anymore, you never meet anyone who is of a differing opinion from you, and therefore you think they're just evil and a monster, and polarization ensues.
Far be it from us to say that marginalized people should hang out with people who are bigoted against them. But like, you know, something that does fix it, like the acceleration of queer liberation in recent decades, you know, in some part happens because even your most conservative person probably has like a gay cousin or something. They might not like
all
that.
Of my family. I am the transgender cousin of the family.
Right. And it's like, that does make people chill out a little bit. Like, a person might still be bigoted if they have a queer family member, but they kind of deal with it more, going from like, these people are the devil incarnate, instead go, I don't agree with your life choices. And like, that still sucks. That's still prejudice.
Rude, yeah.
But like, it's less politically active. It's less like
murderous.
Yeah. And it creates more room for the normalization of queer identity, of coming out, of being lesbian or gay or, you know, another thing.
A furry.
The normalization of furries is crucial. Anyone you know could be one. Think about it. Your mom, even. You don't know.
Oh, let me just give her a call and find out right now, live on the show, if she is or not.
It's here that I have to partially show my hand and reveal that the Mother specifically has it out for the Jedi Order. This is like a petty vendetta for her. When Alicia was young, she was Force sensitive, but not that much. Certainly not compared to her sister, Olivia, who was taken by the Jedi to be trained. And Alicia wasn't. And she resented that for the rest of her life, that she wasn't picked, that she wasn't good enough. So her hatred of the Jedi dovetails nicely into her integration with the baked-in prejudice of the path, according to whom the Jedi just so happen to be, at best, horribly misguided. You know, we have this person who has this prejudice, who has this bigotry, and is going, well, these people kind of agree, kind of ideologically on my side, and I'm going to use them for power. Also, we gotta lay down the fact that despite the Mother up till now having everything up her sleeve, everything under control, this does not stay the case. The path of the open hand may be led by a grifter, but when they first leave Dalna, it becomes this constant struggle for power between the Mother, the Herald, and even Marta, with Yana just kind of not wanting to be there, but desperately grieving over her girlfriend and trying to make do looking after her cousin. Let's shift focus a bit. Elsewhere in the Dalnan sector were the twin planets Erino and Irem. The main thing you need to know about them is that they fucking hated each other. They moved in and out of hostile periods, disagreeing about trade, conflict, whatever, the name of their moon. During a particularly brutal warring period, Erino was facing intense drought. Irem was also running low on resources, and the Republic stepped in to help broker peace. Neither Irem nor Erino are Republic member worlds, but they're destabilizing the sector. So, one of the Supreme Chancellors, Orlan Malo, as well as several Jedi and Chancellor Greylark's son, Axel, join in as neutral third parties to encourage negotiation. Yet, don't get it twisted, there are two Supreme Chancellors at this point. So there's Malo, who pals around in the Outer Rim, and Kiong Greylark, who deals with shit on Coruscant.
So this is like some like late Roman Empire shit where you have two emperors, one controls the east, one controls the west.
Precisely. Yeah, Kiong sends her son, Axel. We remember him. As a show of effort and solidarity, the heirs of both planets' monarchs betroth themselves to one another to ensure a political bond between worlds. It's very dramatic. And Irem and Erino are largely on the right track to put the war behind them. But so you have people within planetary governments trying to intervene in the peace process and the royal wedding, as did certain entities off-world. Alicia Zeveron The mother had her sticky fingers in all of it. She sent an assassin to target the marrying couple, as well as using Axel Greylark, remember, they're buds, as an agent to escalate the conflict. Axel does some damage, but he's caught and imprisoned by the Republic for conspiracy and murder.
It's really going to hurt his mom's re-election chances.
It's not great.
This is like Hunter Biden's laptop if it was real.
The mother's interest in Irem and Arano seems twofold. One, continuing conflict in the same sector probably makes it easier to operate from or around Dalna. And two, the failure of peace talks ushered in and orchestrated by the Jedi will reflect poorly on the Order, which she has it in for. She was sabotaging a Jedi mission as much as anything. So it's decided by the future monarchs of the planets and the Jedi to move negotiations and the signing of a peace treaty to a formal summit on a third-party world. So they decide to take it to Jeddah.
Oh, very poor decision. Very poor decision.
For the sake of the plot, they go to Jeddah.
This is like trying to have like a peace summit in like freaking Jerusalem.
It is almost literally that. And also, the Dalnan sector is so far away from Jeddah. It is like a third of the galaxy away.
So this is just plot.
It's just plot. So yeah, everyone's going to Jeddah. 3 centuries before Imperial occupation, Jeddah was bustling. It was this hub of worship and religious fervor. Once upon a time, it was a key location for the Jedi, but the Pilgrim Moon was home to more kinds of Force believers than you could count. Some holding open hostility towards the Jedi for their political presence and perceived entitlement. The Jedi are the establishment both on Jeddah and in the wider galaxy with the Republic. Near to 382 BBY, several prominent sects agreed to form a decision-making body to lessen the hostility in the Holy City and open dialogue between disparate beliefs where all would be welcome. Thus, the Convocation of the Force was formed to meet in a building in Jeddah City's central square. Represented in the convocation were the Jedi, of course, their non-Force sensitive offshoot, the Church of the Force, and the Guardians of the Wills, but also the Disciples of the Wills, who had very different ideas about what balance in the Force meant. The Falanasi, who understood the Force as a white current, the Lanto, who used the light side to grow and control plant life, the Makutai, who purified themselves through the Force and physical discipline, and the Sorcerers of Tund, who worshipped the Force as a unity that dwells in one's heart. So, as you can imagine, the Convocation of the Force, all of these religions coming together was really effective and helped usher Jeddah into a new era of peace and prosperity. Just kidding. They argued a bunch and sometimes broke out into actual violence.
Something that has never happened before and will never happen again in real life, ever.
Religious violence? That's fucking crazy.
No.
That's super fucking coconut.
I love me an ecumenical council because we all know they're never going to work, but we keep doing them anyway. Ecumenical being, between churches, right? But all the time in all these religions, they're like, hey, let's have a council. We're going to finally work out our differences. And it never works because, as it turns out, certain beliefs are fundamental. Just recently, Justin Welby, who is the Archbishop of Canterbury and the global head of the kind of Anglican communion, it's called, right, was in Rome and did for the first time ever, like an Anglican mass in St. Peter's Basilica, which is, kind of the center church of Roman Catholicism. And, wow, of course, Pope Francis and our boy Justin are like real into this and like, look at us, we're doing unity. All of like the traditionalist Catholics are losing their shit and calling like a new Protestant Reformation, but different. And all of the traditionalist Anglicans are in the chat being like, we cannot compromise with the Bishop of Rome. He hath no jurisdiction in this realm of England, yada, yada, yada. So it's just another thing like this is the Council of the Churches of Christ, which funnily enough has a really big building near Times Square in New York City. And it has like all the traditional US mainline denominations there. They all still hate each other.
Well, I mean, you might have these leaders who are trying to uphold like these very liberal ideas. We're being unified, we're working together. And sometimes it also doesn't work for the leadership, but you will often have, right, these congregations that are just like fucking like, no, what? No.
Right, like
you can't
we
tell
are
me
the
what
one
to
true
do.
church. They can't also be the one true church.
Yeah, that is in fact directly opposed to what you were telling us a couple weeks ago. Just because you have your leaders meeting together in a little in a little gathering doesn't mean the people are going to like it. And the people of Jeddah do not like the convocation. People saw the convocation decisions as arbitrary. The convocation is going to hold this like festival of balance to promote community between Force religions, and people just fucking hate it. They think it's patronizing, they think it's disrespectful, they think it's out of touch, which maybe, I don't know.
A little bit.
There were Jedi who thought that. An envoy is sent from the Yakombe religion to petition the convocation for a representative seat. And the Falanasi and the Makutai representatives both actively threaten the envoy. They're prejudiced against them for generations past disagreements. And the Yakombe withdrew their petition. So the convocation was created with good intentions, but was largely a mess. Anyway, the Path of the Open Hand moves to Jeddah, and they purchase a rundown building that they convert into an almshouse to offer to those of the Holy City who are sick or shelterless. For months, they give aid wherever requested, all as gifts freely given. This also had the effect of significantly growing their number of converts as they began to hold sermons on the street wherein they'd preach the word of the Mother, that the Force would be free, and that a reckoning would come to anyone who bends the Force to their will. The Path and their ideas start to be pretty popular to a lot of the alienated city population. The Path also sent Sunshine Dobbs ahead to the convocation of the Force to notify the convocation of the Path's intention to petition for a seat. Funnily enough, around this time, various Force artifacts belonging to different groups begin to go missing.
Gosh darn it, they can't even hold off of it when they're in Star Wars Jerusalem. They're just like, yes, let's go to the, chapel at Calvary and let's steal something from there as well. Because
they go to the Temple of the Khyber and they steal a crystal statue right from under the noses of the Guardians, which is, as far as things you can do in Jeddah City, pretty damn serious. Additionally, the Iram Arano Peace Summit is going on in an old temple inside the Holy City, headed not by the ruling families of the planets or their heirs, but by their respective ambassadors. And remember how I said that, stopping the war wasn't the most popular thing among people in the government? Well, that was borne out in negotiations because both of the ambassadors brought fleets to Jeddah just in case things
they
got
need to
bad.
blow each other up.
They started to. A bomb was detonated in the temple, killing the Republic-appointed treaty mediator, and more bombings occurred intended to kill both ambassadors later on. Tensions rise immediately, and both ambassadors blame this attack on the other party, and they get more and more hostile. After these attacks, the first people on the scene to help administer support and first aid, besides the Jedi already on site, are members of the Path. Having, therefore heard of these bombings, the Mother and Marta go to the committee to recommend one of the Path elders, a man named Delwyn, for the mediator seat. They're denied, and the committee selects another third party to oversee the signing, a wealthy underground weapons dealer, Tilson Graff.
Yeah, let's have a weapons dealer, stop our war.
I don't think it's clear that he's a weapons dealer. He just does do that. So the treaty mediator is a shady guy. Investigations into the attack are pretty well sabotaged by some bullshit Force trickery that we don't really need to get into. Around this time, there is another bombing at the Temple of the Khyber, seemingly an attempt to obscure the earlier artifact burglary. One temple archivist was killed, but another was saved, Archivist Oranali. As it happens, Oranali has been paid off by the Mother for information in her search for the Rod of Daybreak. We'll come back to him later. On a new day, the Iram Arano Treaty is set to be signed. Everyone's gathered in that temple. There are some Jedi and ambassadors and the mediator. Meanwhile, the Convocation of the Force meets to do their usual well-meaning bullshit. And I do mean bullshit because, the bombing of the Temple of the Khyber? Well, the Convocation decides that the official story during the investigation is that there was a gas buildup.
They did the gas leak thing.
Yeah, I guess to avoid a panic.
Star Wars excuses are so abysmally lazy because gas leaks / mining disasters / a slight weapons malfunction, these are people with
natural disaster, horrible typhoon destroying Camino. Yeah.
Oh yeah, planet that always rains. It just got out of control this one time.
Yeah, the entire planet went from a Category 5 hurricane, which it usually is, to a Category 6 hurricane, which really destabilized all the Caminoan residents.
We never thought it would ever change.
I guess you could have gone like Donald Trump and just nuke the hurricane or whatever to save Camino, but we just ran out of nukes.
Yeah, the Empire didn't have nukes yet, I guess. So they're having this conversation, and then a delegation from the Path of the Open Hand shows up. The Herald, Yana, and Sunshine all arrive at the convocation, which assumes that the Path is there to petition a seat, as they previously announced. But instead, the Herald emphasizes the sanctity of the Force. He condemns its abuse and cites it as causing imbalance in the galaxy. The Herald accuses the convocation of having blood on its hands and calls for its disbanding, proposing a prohibition of Force manipulation within the Holy City. The convocation chair makes the point that the convocation lacks the authority to do that. They can't police behavior, and they can't force certain religions to abandon thousands of years of tradition. So the Herald and his retinue leave the hall, and they walk out into the busy street. The Herald speaks to the people of Jeddah, saying, Faithful of Jeddah, the moment has come for you to know the truth about this city, about the organization that governs your religion. I have just been thrown from the Convocation building for daring to question their authority, for daring to hold a belief contrary to their own. I have been told that my views are preposterous, my concerns without merit. But let me ask you this, is it wrong to question those who lie to us? Is it wrong to demand the truth? The Convocation exists only to further its own agenda, to maintain a lie that places the entire galaxy in danger. The Herald cites the earlier rejection of the Akombe, as well as the cover-up of the attack on the temple, stressing just how dishonest the establishment of Jeddah must be, that the Convocation and even the Jedi could be responsible for these bombings. The Herald is kind of lying. He wasn't thrown out of the Convocation, and he's being extremely incendiary. So Guardians of the Wills ask him to leave and attempt to move him along, and seeing this, the people in the street begin to push back. The Herald starts to clash with the people holding him, the Guardians fight back, and the people go into a frenzy. Things are always tense on Jeddah, and many people are fed up with the Convocation. They're sick of the Jedi, they're sick of all of it. Not all of them, but enough. The Herald's words highlight the years of ideological division that the Pilgrims have experienced, and Yana Rho sets the leveler, grown even larger to covertly prowl the streets, which in turn whips Force users up and makes them see things that aren't there. They feel hunted, and the less Force sensitives are also not feeling great, and they are more scared, and they are more angry, and they are desperate.
The Christopher Nolan Batman series. This is like that riot in the island where the Scarecrow's guys have released all the nut job gas into the air, and so everyone just is seeing shit and stuff. This is what's going on here.
Kinda, yeah.
It's not far off. The Guardians of the Wills are as effective as the GCPD in that scenario, in as much as not very.
ACAB includes the Guardians of the Wills.
Yeah. So the non-Force sensitives who are already resenting the Force sensitives are now being attacked by Force sensitives that are hallucinating. And then it becomes a riot. The conflict in Jeddah City spreads throughout, all the way to the Irem Arano treaty signing, where a rioter, this is true, drives a speeder bike through the window and shoots the Arano ambassador. The Aroni delegation sees this as an act of aggression from Irem, and a firefight ensues in the meeting chamber, as the fleets above are ordered to engage both in naval and terrestrial combat with one another. Irem deploys enforcer droids in the street to fight against Arano's surface artillery, and they break out into proper war. Remember how I said that tech was different back then? Well, comms relays were both less prolific and less reliable, and someone sabotaged Jeddas. So during all this, there is no calling for backup from the Ironi or Irami fleets, or for Republic intervention. No Jedi, no nothing. The riot-turned armed conflict was not the Mother's plan, nor was it exactly intended by the Herald, despite them intentionally riling people up. But they do take full advantage. The Herald, Yana, and a few others, all disguised, violently break into the Temple of the Kyber. They look for the Rod of Daybreak in all the places Oronelli tells them it could be. It isn't in the temple or in the previous hiding place they searched, so they make their way to an ancient Jedi vault of dark side artifacts outside the city. Meanwhile, the battle rages on. The Path Almshouse collapses amidst attacks, and many inside from their community are almost crushed, but are barely saved by the intervention of a Jedi, who evacuates as many Path members as possible to a more defensible location. Outside the Holy City on Jeddah were 4 massive sandstone statues made in the image of robed, lightsaber-wielding Jedi. Over untold years, 3 had collapsed, and by now, only 1 stood over the dunes of contemplation, come to be known as the Final Protector. Not for long, though. People who resented the Jedi went out into the desert, threw ropes over the Final Protector, blew charges placed on its base to destabilize it, and brought it to the ground.
Nice. We see that
that's in Rogue One. That is in Rogue One, yes. The Herald and the others make their way to the aforementioned vault. On the way there, they run a Jedi through with her own lightsaber and take captive the Jedi who represented the Order on the Convocation, Master Liban. In the vault, they find the Rod of Daybreak, which, when combined with the Rod of Seasons, allows for precise control of the leveler. The Herald tests this out and uses the leveler to kill Liban, turning her to dust amidst Yana's protestations. A Jedi and a non-Force sensitive show up, and Yana, the leveler, and the other Path members run, leaving the Rod of Daybreak behind, and the Herald is taken into custody. Again, the mother didn't plan this. She wanted the Rod of Daybreak, but this shit was the Herald going off for his own purposes and getting got for it. Marta is separated from the mother when the almshouse is destroyed, and when she sees a path member being assaulted, she intervenes, using the yellow lightsaber she pulled off Kazmo's body to kill one of the attackers and defend herself. The mother is also harmed in the riot and loses a lot of blood, but is saved by a Jedi who helps her reconvene with Marta. They're beset by Wargren, basically a pack of wild predatory hounds. Marta tries to push them back by threatening them with a saber, and the mother also uses the lightsaber she took from the dead master. It still isn't enough, but Yana finds them and sicks the leveler on the remaining Wargren. The mother tries to order Yana to return to the desert to reclaim the Rod of Daybreak, but Yana refuses. The mother, rattled from the conflict, demands that Yana give her the Rod of Seasons, that the leveler be at the mother's side at all times. Yana still refuses, but it's taken from her anyway, and she's left on Jeddah by the mother and her cousin to somehow get the Rod of Daybreak again. Eventually, comms come back online. The Republic can finally send some peacekeeping backup, and the Iranian Irami forces withdraw. The violence in the street ends. Lots of people are killed, buildings are razed, but the Festival of Balance is held as an opportunity to rebuild. The bombings that preceded the riots were discovered to have been organized by Tilson Graf, the second Iram Irani mediator, but he was conveniently killed in action. Just kidding, the mother paid him, used the riot as a chance to cover her tracks, and shot him dead. So yeah, Jeddah gets pretty fucked up.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about this is it's not explicitly genocidal. So it has that going for it.
That's good. I love aimless violence. So much more wholesome than genocide or other such things.
The capture of the Herald is used by the Jedi and stuff to dispel misinformation among the people of Jeddah. The Jedi don't know about the Leveler, but they know about the Rod of Daybreak, and they know the Herald wanted it. So they say that he intentionally stirred up conflict for his own personal gain. The Jedi also turn the Rod over to the Guardians of the Wills as a show of good faith, and it goes straight into the hands of Archivist Oranali. The mother also pins it all on the Herald. After fleeing the planet on the Gaze Electric with the rest of the path, she sends an open comm message and tells the people on Jeddah that, he was a rogue element. He was radicalized by the death of his daughter, and the path only wants peace and harmony within the Force. And the Herald misunderstood their message. She says she'll launch an independent inquiry to ensure no one in their ranks is similarly radical, and she gives a lot of money to the convocation to rebuild after the conflict. But she is panicked. The mother is extremely wary of people in the galaxy blaming her in the path for the violence. So she leads the path where she never planned, back to Dalna to regroup and to hunker down in the more defensible cave system on the path compound. Marta disagrees with this choice. She wants to keep spreading their word across the galaxy because she believes in the cause. She wanted to be the one to petition the convocation. But what the mother says goes, and her temper is getting shorter and shorter as she gets more and more desperate.
I gotta say, I do like that the mother did the independent inquiry thing. Oh,
Yeah, we're
we
gonna
will
check it
solve
out.
this internally.
And it's like everybody on the payroll is also a cult member.
Yes.
But there's a designated cult member that's like internal investigations. Like, oh, who's your HR? Oh, he's over there painting the blue lines on his face. But he'll get on it.
For what it's worth, she may be kind of paranoid, but the mother isn't wrong. The path is to be investigated for potentially interfering in the peace conference. Chancellor Greylark on Coruscant specifically sends some of her guard and several Jedi to look into the path after her son's involvement with them. And even the people of Ferdin, the Dalnan town near the path compound, are significantly more suspicious of them than before, with the sheriff of the town acting openly hostile to path leadership. Back on Jeddah, Yana considers leaving the path. She wants to. She's hated the mother and her duplicity for a good long while now, but she wants to honor Kor. She wants to do right by her dead girlfriend's shitty father, so she meets up with Archivist Oranali and threatens to out his treachery unless he takes Yana to see the Herald in prison. When Yana and Oranali meet with the Herald in his cell, the Herald tricks Oranali into handing him the Rod of Daybreak, and then the Herald kills Oranali. Yana and the Herald run to rejoin the path on Dalna. On Dalna, Marta's back in faithful doing her best to help the path mode. She invites a reporter, Rick Farazi, to stay with the path after the reporter promises to tell their story to the galaxy. But when the mother learns this, she rebukes Marta. The mother is sick of this teenager after she invited Jedi onto the compound after how badly Jeddah went. So she gets nasty. Alicia rolls her eyes. She scoffs at Marta. She insists that she was wrong for expecting too much of her, which is maybe true. Marta is a teenager, but the mother does it in that sort of self-serving, disappointed way. She insists that the elders, the Herald, even Yana, said that Marta was too young and naive. Of course, this crushes Marta. She feels like she's failed, that no matter what she does, she can't serve the Force correctly.
Empathize with our friend, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transportation Authority, for her...
Marta. You mean Marta.
Yes. Feeling like she can never do anything right, even though she's like trying really hard. That's like a trauma thing. I sometimes feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Meanwhile, the Mother and the Path are preparing. The Mother says that she saw in a vision Jedi coming to Dalna. And so Path operatives begin to arrive from off-world, smuggling purchased arms, munitions, and enforcer droids. Path members train in combat with blasters and melee weapons. Dalnan comm systems are shot, and Axel Greylark is broken out of prison and brought to an unseasonably rainy Dalna.
So they're really going to do a Waco here, aren't they? In the 2010s, there was this kind of weird Christian cult called the Branch Davidians, who had a compound in Waco, Texas. After it was found out that they were doing pedophilia in there because it was a cult, of course they were.
There's no pedophilia in the Path of the Open Hand. That we know of.
That we know of.
That we know of, yeah.
There is an independent investigation occurring right now.
The same guy that's investigating what happened at Jeddah is going to get to that next.
He is a talented man. He just has a lot on his plate.
He's the only member of HR.
But as sort of like a kind of right-wing cult, they arm themselves. And when the feds find out that there's pedophilia going on here, the feds are like, oh, time to bust down their door and stop that from happening. And this goes badly. A lot of people die, like both from suicide and from being murdered by cult members and from being shot by the feds. And a lot of feds die as well. It's just a bad situation.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say for anyone listening that makes this a little different is that this is more like, it is a Waco situation and it does erupt in this and similarly. But the Jedi didn't even do like a knock knock, come out, we're here. It was 3 or 4 Jedi missions that all sort of cross paths here, and they were all supposed to be covert, non-violent. We're not here to try to disrupt. We just need to find some stuff out and piece the hell out of here. And it's not great.
Then becoming more radical and more radical after they feel like they're being persecuted. That's very much like where American evangelicalism is at the moment. Real or perceived, right? These folks feel like they are under attack and they're like, I've heard the term Christian hegemony. I think that's probably accurate. Their kind of stranglehold on society is eroding very quickly. So they feel like they're under threat. They're becoming much more radical, and kind of the good things about American evangelicalism. Believe me, I am not one to ascribe good things to them, but there were good things. There were good aspects. Those have mostly vanished in the face of kind of an overwhelming obsession with right-wing politics, to the extent where we're hearing like pretty conservative evangelical pastors who are having people walk out because they're like quoting Jesus and people think that's too woke.
That preachy lib Jesus.
Yeah, I think that there's very much like a parallel to be drawn there of like the increasing radicalization of that kind of demographic in society.
Well, and that radicalization is a conscious thing done by the political right. Like there were people like the Reagan era GOP who went, oh, we can use these guys. Yeah, we could build up this really reliable base that will keep us in office. You know, you have these people who are actively using
Jerry Falwell, the moral majority, making abortion an issue for non-Catholic Christians.
Right. That was like so deeply like incepted into, like evangelical Christianity as a thing that people cared about, because no one used to care about abortion by comparison, except for Catholics.
Except for Catholics.
I mean, sometimes you pick a topic and you get some religious people freaked out about it, and there's your voters. That's the strat.
And it's paying off. Look, I don't want to be an alarmist here, right? There is a conceivable path where in the next 15 to 20 years, the evangelicals are in control in a way that you can't just unelect them anymore.
Right. It is one of those things that makes American politics deeply fucked. And deeply fucked in a way that is not the same as right-wing pushes in other countries. Like the weird right-wing shit going on in Italy or in the UK is completely different because it doesn't have this, mostly doesn't have
because Europe is godless, except Poland. Shout out to Poland for being God's most Catholic country. I don't know, in some ways that freaks me out more is having a right wing. Like, you're being a right wing asshole and you don't think God told you you have to? Like, why would you do that?
Nice to maintain power. I don't know. We talk about fascism plenty. We don't need to on this episode. I'm going to quote a passage of the book Path of Vengeance that exactly gets across the vibe of what's going on here. A voice rang out ahead from the direction of the large assembly cavern that the path often used as a meeting place. The place was packed, a sea of gray and blue, but all eyes were on the mother, who sat on what looked disturbingly like a throne on a newly raised platform at the far end of the cave. Her voice rang out strident and true, the cavern's natural acoustics amplifying her words as well as any sound system. We have done well, my brothers and sisters. We have worked our fingers to the bone at the urging of the Force, for its glory, for its protection. The prophecy I received on the way from Jedi has yet to be fulfilled, but that doesn't mean we should become complacent. You only have to look to the skies to see the effect the meddling of our enemies is having on the world. This should be a season of light and renewal, and yet our crops are drowning in the field. So remember that thing you said about hurricanes and the gays?
Yeah, the Jedi cause hurricanes. Fun fact.
Yeah, it's raining really bad, and it's the Jedi's fault. I weep when I think of what is happening to this and other worlds, the crisis we now face. The more the Jedi and their kin abuse the Force, the more they strip it of its power, and the wider the devastation spreads. Even today, I received news from beyond Dalna. The entire galaxy is in tumult. There is disease and famine on every planet and every moon. Children born with terrible deformities, while the elderly die in their thousands, hungry and sick. The Republic tells us all will be well, that we have nothing to fear. And why? Because they are the puppets of the Jedi and their kin. Shouts of agreement rang out around the chamber, the crowd working itself into a frenzy as the mother continued. None of this is being reported on HoloNet channels because the media, like the Republic, cannot be trusted. My sources know the truth, as does the Force, a truth that is being silenced in every corner of the galaxy.
The woke media is silencing the truth of the path of the open hand.
The rains are bad, the crops are dead because of the gays.
Even the children with deformities, which is, I will note, uniquely intense for Star Wars.
Horribly ableist.
Yeah.
This horrible woman, and it is a very like real religious thing, like a real non-religious thing, but like people who are not born the same as the hegemony are treated as catastrophes. When it's like any disabled person would tell you, horribly dehumanizing. When it's like these people are born and they have a horrible life, and it's like, no, I have a life. Yeah. Like there's ableism in the way that the world is set up, and that sucks and that's bad and that affects me poorly. But a lot of that is just you treat me bad, you know, like
yeah, it's not a cosmic cards were dealt and it has to be this way.
Yeah.
And also just the other part of that, the my sources part is so so American at this moment. My sources.
The mother has the sources.
What sources? We don't care.
I Googled it.
It does not matter.
Yeah, and I mean also
my sources that I made it up.
There's like this certain like person, right, who is like the trans people have killed God and replaced them with themselves, right?
Yeah.
First of all, stupid. Second of all, arrogant to assume in the case of the Almighty God that any person can actually have an effect on the omnipresent, omnipowerful, whatever, almighty from whom the entire universe flows. The same way, very arrogant to assume that like the Force needs defending by you. God needs you to defend God. You know, the almighty force that runs throughout the universe needs you to defend it. Very arrogant.
To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity.
Yes,
God
exactly.
is dead, God remains dead, and the Jedi have killed him.
It circles back around to that, and even, you know, that's something that I think that modern Star Wars storytelling has done significantly better than some of the expanded universe and Legends era stuff, is that was inherently more gamified and celebratory of the fact that we are protecting the light and we're learning more about it and we'll uncover all these things, and it was like adventure, go, go, go. Whereas stories like this and even later stuff, like there are people that worship the Force and call it the tide, and they just observe and it just goes in and out, and they don't have an inherent heroic call. They don't feel that that's imbuing them with any sort of power. They observe it, they can use it, they know, but they don't probably use it for much more than fishing.
That's very interesting. Almost a call to receptivity, right? Sort of the Reformation Protestant tradition is that because there is nothing that you can do to like affect your salvation, right? The only thing that can get you into heaven is like belief in Jesus Christ, right? So you're called to be receptive of that, to instead of trying to always strive to do stuff, to be like, oh, I need to do this so I can get this and do this and that. No, you're to be receptive of the presence of God, of the presence of Christ, and let that carry you in the same way that kind of the Force is supposed to be your tide in some of these states.
So remember how I said that the mother's a little bit naturally Force sensitive, but hiding it? Well, as you can imagine, once she's spending time with it 24/7, the leveler starts to take its toll on her. She was a young, fair woman.
Hot.
When she began to lead the path, but with the leveler, Alicia Zeveron ages so prematurely.
The Obama effect.
Kinda. Her skin wrinkles, her hair goes white. After Jeddah, she begins experiencing intense seizures that she credits to the Force visions that enthrall her followers. So she's up there on the stage and she's all, only together can we stand firm, united in the Force, united in our pursuit of freedom, justice, and purity. And she collapses in convulsions. She is having this epileptic attack. And the people of the path praise this. This is a miracle from beyond the veil. It is communion with the Force itself as this woman is having a seizure on the ground as she needs medical attention. How you feeling, Sophie?
Just flashbacky. I don't know, man. That's extremely Pentecostal behavior right there. It's just oh, you're thrashing around on the floor. That means it's God. So,
I thrash around on the floor every day in a very secular way. I don't appreciate them foisting God upon my culture. Yana and the Herald return to Dalna, but the Herald insists that his presence be made secret, that Yana go in herself with the Rod of Daybreak to curry the mother's favor, figure out what she's doing, and check on the Herald's deathly ill wife. Yana is welcomed back with open arms for bringing back what the mother wanted, and the combined artifacts let the mother control the leveler almost psychically, which is not good. Yana checks in on the Herald's wife, who's not doing great, and returns to the Herald, and the Herald is galvanized to go back and reclaim the path from the mother. Speaking of whom, the mother has convinced Axel Greylark to send a message to his mother to falsely claim he's in danger, that Chancellor Keon Greylark must come to Dalna. The mother wants to use Axel's safety as political leverage for the Chancellor to govern according to the will of the path. Axel looks to the path for power and to the mother for friendship, but it becomes apparent that she's using him to get closer to his mother, and Axel is forced to don path robes and prepare for the conflict. The path is this organization that is led by this person who will just say fucking anything to maintain her power and to drum up her supporters. And now she is trying to leverage that into actual political action. So anyway, the path is getting increasingly militarized, and that includes their strongest weapon, because when Sunshine Dobbs found the leveler egg, it wasn't the only one of its kind. So the mother sends Sunshine alongside 2 hired pilots and various path members to secretly retrieve more eggs from Planet X. And Marta, so desperate to do right, sees this as an opportunity to help, a chance to protect the path and the Force. So she talks her way aboard one of the ships. The trip to Planet X is harrowing. 3 ships are sent from Dalna, but one is destroyed on planetary approach, and another is downed. Multiple people are killed by the native wildlife, including a close friend of Marta's. But the thing about Planet X is that it's soaked through with the living Force, and that makes it easier for people to commune with the Force while they're on the planet. So Marta has this experience where suddenly multiple people she's with can feel things through the Force, and these bad things happen. She knows what it's like to be around someone using the Force, and seeing this is traumatic for her. It's intense, and she loses someone close to her, and this changes her. 2 ships leave Planet X, but the one on which the majority of leveler eggs on has a broken hyperdrive, and thank God doesn't make it back. So Sunshine Dobbs' ship limps back to Dalna with a few eggs in tow. So the Jedi come to Dalna. Some come directly from Coruscant after having been sent by the Chancellor. Some are an investigatory team from Jeddah. Others kind of end up there by accident or alongside the Irami Aroni heirs who are interested in path interference of their peace treaty. Because the mother has a shit ton of this specific bioweapon which is designed to destroy Irem's ecosystem. Almost
the entire planet.
Pretty much. Yeah, to false flag them back into war.
The mother did 9/11.
Yeah, the mother did 9/11. On their way back to the Path compound, Yana and the Herald are apprehended by some of these Jedi. They argue, the Herald absolutely killed some folks, and Yana doesn't have clean hands either, but they form a temporary alliance in their shared opposition against the Mother. Together, this group figures out that the Mother has been selling the stolen Force artifacts liberated by the children on the black market for profit, that she poisoned the aforementioned reporter to death. But when more Jedi show up, the Herald panics, and he runs back to the path through the rain, Yana trying to stop him, to warn them that the Jedi are coming to seize them. In front of the rest of the community, the Herald names the Mother as a false prophet, as a tyrant. He says that he was wrong to vouch for her, that they ought to rise up against her to protect the path and the Force. The Mother responds that the Jedi are there for the Herald after his actions on Jeddah, and the path, as ever, listens to her. And it turns into a mob. They are attacking the Herald and Yana, attempting to throw them from the caves. And then the noise is cut through by an order for silence. And Marta stands above them all with her yellow lightsaber raised into the sky. Her trip to Planet X changed her, and now she is determined. She is radicalized in her faith. The mother made her the guide of the path, and no one can take that away. She believes she knows what's right for the path. She says, "Isn't this what they want? The Jedi, the Force killers. After everything we've been through, everything the Force has tried to tell us, look at us. Look at what we've become, fighting among ourselves, tearing each other apart. If the Jedi are here, if they have arrived to bring us to the sword, then this is our moment. They came to us before, and we took them in. We tried to find a way to make them see the truth, but they threw it back in our faces. Only their way mattered to them. Only their path. And here we see the results. The path of the open hand broken, at each other's throats. And all the time the sky weeps above us, our crops rot in the field, and we do nothing. We cower and we plot and we prepare for what exactly? To survive? To continue our way of life? No, that is not good enough. Not anymore. We are the liberators of the Force. We protect it with our lives for the sake of all. If we leave the Jedi unchecked, their evil will tear through the galaxy like wildfire. We offered them a gift freely given, but they wouldn't take it. Now we offer another gift, a gift they won't be able to refuse, a gift we will deliver here on Dalna and in the galaxy beyond, on Jeddah, on Iram and Arano, on Coruscant itself. They did not heed our warning, and now they will pay the price not of an open hand, but a closed fist. Who walks the path with me? Who walks the path of the closed fist?
Gnarly.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like her declaring a jihad. That's cool.
Yeah. It goes from let's be safe in our little bunker to we are now a death cult and we are killing our enemies, our religious enemies. We're doing holy war. It's giving death cult. It's giving jihad. It's giving holy war. Yeah, it's that.
Oh my God. That's a clip. Just pull that out of no context.
Yeah. The members of the Path of the Closed Fist, instead of the 3 horizontal wavy lines, draw angry vertical blue lightning bolts down their foreheads.
Ooh.
They cheer, they chant. Yana is horrified, but the Herald joins in and calls Yana a coward for her refusal to join. And the Herald and the Mother both get their words in. They rile up the people, they're making sure they got a seat at the table. Marta has given them this chance. The reason they're fighting is because they're both these power-hungry assholes. And Marta's like, no, we shouldn't be fighting. We should be killing these other guys. As the mob begins to filter out of the caves, Yana tries to reason with Marta to convince her that the Mother is using her, that it's time for them both to leave. Yana grabs Marta by the arm, but Marta whirls her lightsaber around and severs Yana's hand at the wrist, leaving her lying in the dirt. The ensuing battle on Dalna is brutal. Jedi cut down droids and do their best to disarm or dismember attacking path members. As the rain falls harder and harder, many Jedi themselves are killed, both by the advancing path forces or the newly hatched levelers stalking the flooding tunnels. Non-path citizens of Dalna from Ferdin join in as backup, and path-hired mercenary fighters in the sky fire on support ships from Arano, summoned after a Hail Mary attempt to get past the comms blackout. The Mother and Marta command the masses, directing waves of droid attacks and overseeing the path security system. And just as a contingency, the Mother secretly sends littles of the path, their kids, to lay thermal charges.
No, child soldiers, no.
Star Wars has done it again.
No.
Yeah. The child bombs part was not my favorite reading experience.
She's sending out these kids. They're putting bombs all along the caves, just in case. And they are caught by Yana, who is still injured, and she confronts Marta again. At the use of friendly child soldiers, Marta is finally horrified by what's going on. Marta goes to find the Mother, who's holed up in her normal chambers. She fights the Mother for control of the charge detonator, and Jedi intervene, So they've been pointed directly to the Mother's chambers because they apprehend and they cuff the Herald, and the Herald really wants them to also take down the Mother.
What Joe Sabian from Lions Led by Donkeys would call the unifying theory of fuck that guy.
Yeah. The Mother threatens to blow the caves, to bring it down on everyone's heads. But Marta and the Herald notice that the Mother's arms have started to turn to cold gray stone.
She's getting her ashes to ashes moment.
Yeah.
She's going dust mode.
She's going dust mode. The Leveler isn't just aging her, it is killing her. And the Mother is outed as what she is, a Force-sensitive con artist who used the Force and the Path at every step to get whatever she wanted. Wealth, veneration, control, and revenge on the Jedi. The Jedi present get control of the detonator, but the Mother grabs the combined rods of power, and the approaching levelers start to weaken the Jedi. The Herald attacks the Mother, finally trying to kill her. Marta takes the rods and runs. The Mother kills the Herald with her lightsaber, but the Jedi disarm her and lay her out flat. Marta and Yana intentionally blow the charges to flood the caves and use the rods of power to direct the levelers into the rushing water to kill them. The flood separates the two of them, as well as the two rods of power. Marta keeps hold of the Rod of Seasons. Fighting eventually ceases on Dalna. Many are dead, and some Jedi are seriously traumatized after surviving proximity to the leveler. Though, again, they didn't know that's what it was at the time. The Jedi set up an emergency camp with tents and medical aid for any wounded. For what it's worth, Kian Greylark did come to Dalna at Axel's request, but before that, she resigns the chancellorship so she can't be politically blackmailed.
What a goat.
Yeah.
Like, this is the highest quality possible public servant we have right here.
Axel is horrified by the violence and betrayal around him, and he fights against the path to be with his mother. He agrees to go back to prison after things calm down on Dalna.
Good for him, agreeing to go back to prison.
For killing some people, yeah. The Herald is dead, and the mother is in custody. She's held in a Jedi tent, but Marta is still in control of the Rod of Seasons. And the Leveler, the first one, the fully grown one, survived after all the hatchlings died. The mother pleads for mercy. She tries to convince Marta that they can work together to revive the path, but Marta is determined to free the Force. So she sets the Leveler on Alicia, turning her into a stone husk, finally killing her. Yana survives too. She managed to save Yor's mother, Opari, from the flood and says goodbye to Marta. Their lives at this point are way too different, and Marta's beliefs are much too extreme for reconciliation. Marta escapes Dalna with the Leveler aboard the Gaze Electric. She finds other off-world members of the Path and invites them to join her, as well as recruiting others to crew the Gaze. Marta grows less devout and more vicious. She occasionally finds and kills Force sensitives to keep the Leveler alive, but eventually she dumps it on some far-off, inhospitable planet so she doesn't have to deal with it anymore. The result of Marta's pilgrimage starts as a religion and then turns into this basically pirate gang with Marta as their warrior queen, essentially. That is far beyond the scope of this episode. The Path of the Open Hand does survive, sort of, and reverts back to a communal, insular life. By 232 BBY, the cult moved from planet to planet often and came to be known as the Elders of the Path. It even included some longer-living members of the Path from Dalna. The religion held to their anti-Force sensitive beliefs, and ultimately, they still really sucked.
And did the elders change the way that they dealt with their youth?
Not really.
And that's part of phase 1. I mean, there is a little in phase 2 who is an old man and one of the elders in phase 1 because of his species is long lived. Yeah. It sucks to see sort of the generational rot and where this sort of leads in terms of what other groups become and what the family generational trauma is. And you get like these offshoot groups and commentary there. You get the direct row bloodline and commentary there, and it's all different flavors of trauma.
Marta believes less and less as she gets older and sort of believes more and more in the virtue of power. And it is miserable. Like, this religion changes her life and kind of destroys it. And I have so much sympathy for like the way in which Marta as a teenager in this belief system that she holds so strongly to, the ways in which she is constantly grasping for what is the thing that I can do right? What is the thing that the Force wants of me? And the mother keeps smacking her down and telling her no, or the universe says it's not so simple as she can just figure that shit out. She feels like, she should be able to. She's told she should be able to. And it breaks her and it wears her down and it radicalizes her, and she kills folks and she dismembers her cousin, and like she regrets some of that and she doesn't regret other bits of it, and it is horrible.
She's a victim and also a perpetrator, but those two things generally dovetail.
The thing with her throughout all these actions and incidents, whether it's the death of Kevmo or what she's directly done or radicalizing the open hand into the closed fist or further radicalizing, is that removal that we touched on at the beginning, that these are not actually my actions, and even when they are, they're preventative. Kevmo killed Kevmo. We didn't kill Kevmo. And even though I loved him, I now have this confirmation bias infecting and corrupting every single aspect of my life, to the point where I maimed my cousin because she dared see things a little bit differently, even though she experienced a loss that was not inflicted by the Force or its power.
But by our fucking cult leader.
Yeah. Wanton violence. She can't differentiate between anything anymore. She's going to live a life of a constantly moving goalpost post because Marta has no closure for any single one of her storylines. It all lingers and she just has to move. And I think that there's something deeply real world about that, especially in terms of the oppression, the religious oppression of I have moved on to the next chapter, but there was not a single bit of catharsis with any relationship from the previous one.
She goes from absolute certainty to none.
When people who have faith are certain, that's when it becomes dangerous, I think, a lot of times. Like, doubt is not the opposite of faith. Certainty is. Being absolutely certain, having no doubt in what you think is the path to radicalism, is the path to holy war and religious fundamentalism, political extremism. Like, having an absolute certainty in something, it can be a little dangerous. Quite dangerous, really.
Well, and that doesn't mean you don't believe things. It doesn't mean you don't have stances, but it means you go, okay, I'm evaluating where I'm at on this. You know, that's what it's about, is you have to be evaluating where you're at and you have to be willing to be wrong, right? There's a humility to like this ongoing process of, I want to say belief, but I don't just mean belief in faith. I mean belief in ideas. We talk a lot about the Jedi being kind of funny from like a real world perspective because the Jedi are ontologically good, right? Hypothetically, they work for a literal extant higher power, but also so do other people, and other people do it worse than the Jedi. Like, not every other person does it worse than the Jedi, but like there is something worth doing about the Jedi Order. Is, you know, we learned that from The Last Jedi. We learned that from stories like this. I don't know. These dudes are fine. These dudes are kind of cool even. I like Jedi. There it is. There's your thesis.
I like Jedi.
Jedi, you know, kind of neat. I have the same take as every little kid in 1977. Jedi seem cool, you know?
To be a functioning human being, you have to be able to accept that you might be wrong. And if you can't accept that you might be wrong about an issue, you are going to do bad things.
You're either going to hurt people or you're going to hurt yourself or both. And that's the path of the open hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not great, yeah.
We've got a bit of an email backlog, so we'll answer a handful of them and do more next episode. Our first email is from Dusty Hill. Hello, just started listening and heard y'all's request in episode 4 to mail in. Loving the show so far. I GM an Unwavering Force, a Star Wars actual play, and the in-depth politics talk is giving me life and lots of resources. Can't wait to hear about more queer Star Wars. Mailing in from a galaxy not that far away, Dusty. Thank you very much, Dusty.
Thanks, Dusty.
I DM my own tabletop game, just like a home game, and it's not Star Wars, but the level of world building, if you want that sort of tone, the actual politics and the world building of the setting are crucial to what you do as a GM. So yeah, I mean, if anyone here is listening and likes actual plays, go listen to an Unwavering Force, you know? Our next is from Liam Belson. Liam says, Dear Daughters of Ferrix, how are you? I am well. I'm doing well, Liam. Thank you very much. You doing well? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Did you know that the LEGO Resistance Bomber has a bomb launching function that launches differently colored molds of the Zammer spears from the 2006 Bionicle line? It's true. I have a lot of fondness for the Star Fortress, owing to the fact that it's probably one of the most well-designed sets of the era, at least in my opinion. This is just to say that I appreciated all the discussion of one of my favorite sets and was interested in learning more about it. Hoping you are well, Liam.
Thanks, Liam.
Very charming email. I do not have the LEGO Resistance Bomber set, but I found it really funny at the time that the Resistance Bomber was kind of just an opportunity to put in all of the main Resistance people who not like Rose and Finn because they were in a different set, but you know, you got Poe, you got Paige, you got Holdo, you got a couple of Resistance pilots. Just get them all in there where they're a little bit relevant. I mean, just kind of delightful.
The thing I love the most about this is the utter specificity of it. This is an email of somebody that knows what they want and what they like. You will get asked a lot in podcasting and broadcasting, like, who is the ideal listener? Like when you're making a radio station or whatever, and what kind of person do you want to listen to your show and everything. And I think this right here, this is your wheelhouse. People that are able to bust out these cross references. These are the people. So I salute you.
I think there is a generosity to saying, hey, you're talking about this thing that I like. Here's this weird fucking Bionicle fact. It's not that weird. I know the Zamor spears. I wasn't like a big Bionicle person, but I was unsurprisingly big into Lego bricks when I was a kid. So I know what piece you're talking about. I didn't know it was in the Resistance Bomber. Yeah, I think there's a real open-heartedness to that. So thank you so much, Liam. Our last email is from Lewis Holding. Lewis says, Hi, daughters. Hello from the UK, and thank you so much for your wonderful podcast. I've been hunting for a good Star Wars podcast for ages because I really don't want to listen to some man-child talk about Galen Merrick power scaling for hours at a time. and your left-wing discussion of Star Wars politics/ethics/minority representation as it pertains to real-world examples is immensely refreshing. Yeah, I'm with you, Lewis. That is also not my type of thing. Sometimes we talk about, a little bit of dense lore stuff here, but a lot of this podcast was born from, God, what do I actually want to work on and listen to? On the topic of everything is racist from this week's episode on capital ships, I wanted to share an observation that might prompt discussion about alien races and their base level treatment in Star Wars. In Dungeons & Dragons, when you choose a non-human race, there's often a description of almost always this race is evil. Tieflings might not have an innate tendency towards evil, but many of them end up there. Drow are vicious and dangerous. Drow are more often evil than not. I was recently reading the High Republic book Light of the Jedi and found that the Trandoshan Jedi Skier was described in a similar way, that somehow the observer was amazed that an alien from a predatory or supremacy-focused species could become a Jedi. There's definitely been a level of pushback on this by both Disney and Wizards of the Coast who make D&D to make these exceptions to the norm for these races, but I find it interesting that it still lingers as a bit of intentionally literal xenophobia that both IPs have baked into their world building. As a side note, not sure if either of you played card games, but there's a new game called Star Wars Unlimited that's releasing in March that's linking to a lot of niche elements of the Star Wars universe. Just wanted to put that on your radar in case either of you are into trading card games. Thanks for your excellent podcast, Lewis.
Thank you, Lewis.
I do want to say, I think the Dungeons and Dragons connection is really interesting there because, you're right that there have been concerted efforts on the part of Wizards to dial that back. I mean, I'm not, super into Dungeons and Dragons, but I know that, compared to 3.5 or Dungeons and Dragons version 3.5, where race-based alignments was, this huge mechanical feature in 5e, basically Dungeons and Dragons now, that is essentially non-existent. That is this effort to make things less defined along the lines of race. But also D&D is a really interesting pick for comparison because in Dungeons and Dragons, there is, kind of like in Star Wars, but pretty different. There is ontological evil. We have devils, which are literally definitionally from the 9 hells. Demons are from the abyss. And so demons are chaotic evil and devils are, I think, lawful evil in 3.5 and stuff. So you kind of get this impulse to give them alignment because your people who are from the celestial plane, is that the heaven place? God, this is not my area. Are ontologically good. And so you get some of that, but then you want to tell actual human stories. And the thing about actual human stories is that you can't do racially based moral alignment.
I mean, you can, but you shouldn't.
But because if you do that and it is a story with humanity and I don't know what the, you know what I mean? That's racist. We're doing racism.
I think there's something very interesting there because I actually remember being kind of off-put. What was the guy's name again? The Trandoshan Jedi? Skier. I remember being kind of put off by that when we talked about that one time. It's oh, well, he's from an aggressive species. Wow, that sounds an awful lot like race science, and that's clearly patently nonsense because people have this lovely thing called higher reasoning. And even if they did have inherently violent implications, and I put that in air quotes, they will be able to overcome it. No one has inherently violent inclinations, but if they did, they could overcome it because they are an intelligent being and they could simply not do that thing.
You run into the limitations of having alien species portrayed the way they are in Star Wars. For a lot of us Star Wars fans, Trandoshans as an aggressive people is something baked into us. We know Bosk. We know that he's this bounty hunter guy. We know how they, whatever. People who interact with the world in the way that we do not vary in those sorts of things, right? We do not have evil races in the real world. And so having...
Well, I mean, look.
Okay.
You can't count out the Dutch.
Can never count out the Dutch. To a point, you kind of can't fall back on that sort of, as Lewis put it, literal xenophobia. Star Wars wants to have this species that has this sort of hierarchy-based
This
thing
is the racism species.
Yeah, they have this disease that can make them evil. we have the Twi'leks who all of the women tend to be put into sex work.
This is the prostitute species.
Yeah.
And they're all French.
Yeah, this is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right? You cannot keep doing this and not perpetuate the idea that some people are naturally inclined to something based on their race.
Yeah.
This is kind of an inherently racist idea. And I get it. I get the impulse for science fiction storytelling and fantasy storytelling.
You want the planet of hats.
Yeah.
You want the species
of
hats.
It's tidy. It's kind of exciting. I get wanting to do differences in culture and in inclination. But if you're not doing that in a complicated and varied way, it can get real yikesy real fast.
Yeah. And even the greatest, one of the forefathers of this entire thing, and Tolkien, never came down on what he wanted to do with the orcs, famously. It was the thing that was the least developed. It was the thing that even into his later years with his letters and everything, there was never any sort of, I've said this about every creature being of the secret fire and everybody having their place in the song, but I also wanted the cannon fire army of baddies that no one should feel bad about taking out. So how do you reconcile the two? And you really can't. Star Wars similarly has been trying to make exceptions for everyone. Every species now has its, well, they went this way instead of this way, which is good, but you want to make it more, it's not just a couple guys of each one. You know, seeing the spread of it happen, I always bring up the Gungan stuff, like Han and his Gungan microaggression of wanting to do a Jar Jar impression the minute he meets one, of like, we wanna, and then the Gungan being like, let me stop you right there, buddy. All right, I'm working. Like, you're just immediately cutting to the chase of the conversation, or how Black Chrysanthemum factors into the Wookiees, or the pale Wookiee with his claws and legends, or how we've seen, I don't want to say moments of thoughtfulness, because it's not rare in Star Wars. Like, I'm not knocking any particular area of it, but you have times of like the Geonosians where it's like, well, are they a hive mind, or should I feel really bad about this particular one? And that's tricky too. So it's not going to get to a perfect place anytime soon, but it is, I mean, like that Dungeons and Dragons difference between the versions is pretty stark, and Baldur's Gate has tried to expand that out. There are still a few races that you can't play as, which is maybe would help. There's still some that are locked into mostly villainous roles like hobgoblins and things, but it is nice. I mean, you don't want people to grow up like the World of Warcraft kids did, where the entire thing is based on a faction binary that includes races.
It gets dicey. It gets dicey, and Star Wars is not careful. Star Wars is not careful about it. They've gotten better, but they still do it. Thank you so much for your email, Lewis. If you have any questions, suggestions, or corrections, you can send them to our show email, daughtersferrix@gmail.com. I also want to spotlight a review we got on Apple Podcasts from user file_under/store, real readable name there, entitled New Favorite Podcast. They say, love this podcast. This is how I look at media content in general, but I love Star Wars because of how much there is to gain from it. The way you two make this fun and insightful while linking important real-world topics is unmatched. This is crucial to understanding Star Wars. Have listened to all episodes, going to go back through to listen again. That's a lot of audio, my friend, but I'm really grateful that
Please develop a parasocial relationship with us.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. But thank you so much for listening. If you want to, go ahead and rate us wherever you're listening, follow the show, or share this episode with someone you know. Alden, where can our loveliest of listeners find more of you?
You can find me everywhere, literally everywhere. I think I'm on all the platforms. Oh, except TikTok. I'm not on there anymore because I value my time. But that's that Alden Diaz, ThatAldenDiaz. Octa Radio Star Wars podcast is back now. Yes. Then Anytime with Ken and Alden every Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific. Writing all over the internet, and see you in Japan.
Absolutely.
Yeah, see you in Japan. And thanks for coming on, Alden. You've been a really great guest.
Oh, thank
absolutely
you.
Fantastic.
I appreciate it.
If you want to listen to new episodes as they release every other Wednesday, you can find us on most places you can listen to podcasts, on our website, daughtersofferrix.com, or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at FerrixPod, FerrixPod.
Special thanks to a bunch of people over on Twitter for their help recalling events and interpreting character motivations. Jaina Zevron at Rogue Oneism, Braddington at Brad Whipple, Charles at CW Rogers 6, Claudia at Claudia Says, and Brian at Swank Motron. I have been Eleanor Mueller. You can find me at The Letter Bomber on most platforms. Sophie, what about you?
You can find me at Sophia in SLC on Twitter, and at my other podcast at @TheRedLine_pod, where we talk about public transportation, urban planning, and apparently architecture.
Our episodes are written and edited by me, Eleanor Mueller, and Sophia Dunstan. Our podcast art is by Jill Mueller. Our intro and outro music was arranged by me, with themes by Nicholas Bertel and John Williams. Thanks for listening.
Don't start a cult.
Do start a cult.
Don't start a cult.
Go ahead.